Hello, Dave here again from Creative Guitar Lounge. It's been a while, but I wanted to do a video today about a subject which is kind of probably a bit confusing to a lot of us guitarists, which is that of modes. And they're probably something that you come across at some point in your guitar playing journey, especially if you're doing any amount of lead guitar playing. Because you'll hear them associated with various players. You probably start off with the kind of the blues scale like most of us do, and then you can move that up 3 frets or down 3 frets, whichever way you look at it, and you get the major equivalent, you get the major blues scale. So we kind of all go along with that for an awful long time, and we maybe add a couple of little scales to that from time to time, and you pick bits and pieces up. But you probably continually hear different players that you may get into for a while being associated with modes. I always remember Carlos Santana was always associated with the Dorian mode, for example, and much later on in my life, Steve Vai came along and Joe Satriani and these kind of people, and you started to hear things like Lydian modes and so on. So if you weren't a kind of classical guitarist or a jazz player, you probably weren't really very familiar with those kind of terms. So in my day, we didn't have the internet, you didn't have YouTube, you could go on and look at tons of videos about that. So you had to kind of either learn these things or not. And in my case, I just learned lots of different scale patterns based on the root note. So whereas modes were definitely a part of my playing, I kind of thought of the Dorian mode as a scale, and I would play it against, if I was playing any minor based chord sequence, I would just use a pattern starting on the root note of A with a couple of notes added in, which I'd learned as a Dorian pattern. But I kind of got to the stage where I wanted a bit more of an understanding of this stuff, so I've put this video together and to try and simplify things, because basically the idea of modes are basically just different aspects of the humble major scale, or in this case we're doing the main major modes. So I've put together a spreadsheet which I put on the screen now, a diagram rather, and you might want to just kind of pause and take a screenshot of that because I'm going to be referring to that. I've also done some guitar recordings to basically pull this together that you can listen to and hopefully hear these modes and start to kind of experiment with them yourself, just to get them into your head, because they really are just sounds like everything else we do, but they're just different ways of expressing a similar kind of thing. So anyway, here's the diagram we'll refer to. So what I've got here is I've done a 3-note per string repeating pattern of the major scale. Yeah, and it just goes across all 6 strings. And the first note, as you'll see from this, that's going to be your root note. So wherever you start on the fretboard on the bottom E string and follow this pattern, that's the major scale that you're playing. Okay, so I've just gone for E in this case, just the first note, open note, bass note on the guitar. And the way this kind of works is each note of the major scale has a chord which corresponds to it, and those are either major or minor. And so the second part of this, where I've got here root, chord, major, is kind of explaining what each chord is. It's going to be different depending on the root note you start on, but you've got the first chord, for example, corresponding to the first note is major, then minor, minor, major, major, minor, and diminished, and then back to the root. Okay, so those are the notes. So if we're in E as we are in this diagram, your first chord, your first note is E, and the first chord is E major of the E major scale. Okay, the second chord will be F sharp minor, and so on and forth. The third note will be G sharp minor, and then A major, B major, and so on and so forth. So you can see from that how that kind of works with the notes and their corresponding chords on major scales. And the modes basically are that scale, that same scale, exact same scale, but played over the different chords that are derived from the major scale. So if you're playing that scale, the E major scale, over the chord of E major, then that is the Ionian mode. Okay. If you're playing F sharp minor over, you're playing that E major scale over the chord F sharp minor, then that is the Dorian mode. So it's F sharp Dorian, but you are just playing, in this example, an E major scale over that to get that feel. Okay, and so it goes on. So you have Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Okay, so those are the names of the modes, and on the far right of this diagram, I've got a little mnemonic method of remembering the order of the modes. So I don't play loud music at lunch, and you'll see how that corresponds. Ionian, I, Dorian, D, Phrygian, play, and so on and so forth. So that's a good way of remembering the order of them, and hopefully this all kind of ties together for you. I recorded a little, basically me just playing that scale, the E major scale, through all of the various chords that derive from it, so that you can hear the sound of these modes. And what I would do if I were you to practice this, to kind of get these into your head, I haven't done much improvisation. I really just played just to demonstrate that I'm playing exactly the same scale over all of these different chords, to give you the sound of the modes, to get them into your head. What I would do to further get that into your brain is just improvise, use that pattern. Goes across all 6 strings, try it in different keys, but these are the rules that apply, and that's how you get the modes. So I kind of hope that helps. Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't so far subscribed, please consider doing so. Really kind of helps me out. All right, cheers for now.